I decided to do my presentation on the history and political organization of Ecuador. So largely, Ecuador has one of the biggest histories of being the most politically unstable countries in Latin America, not due to violence, but instead political unrest because of the 80 different governments and 20 plus different constitutions and its only 192 years of sovereignty. Ecuador does have a lot of resources throughout the country, but the political unrest has largely stunted the economic prosperity of the state. So I'm going to go into a bit of the history and understand why Ecuador is the way it is. In the times of the Spanish colonialization, they came in around 1554. They quickly overtook the region until 1822, when Ecuador would gain their sovereignty in the Battle of Pichincha. After this battle concluded, it was decided to join the Republic of Gran Colombia, but they only stayed with the Republic of Gran Colombia for 8 years. And in 1830, Ecuador seceded and established its own independent republic. Having gained its independence, two large cities kind of took over. In these cities, Quito and Guayaquil had grown in their power during Spanish rule and continued to do so afterwards. In Guayaquil, in the north, was the political center. It was largely built on indigenous labor and relied heavily on the clerical hierarchy. And in the south was Guayaquil, which was a port city and the main port for the exports and imports of Ecuador, which allowed it to have a spot in the global economy. The contention between these two cities did grow and actually created a lot of political unrest throughout the years. And it wasn't until around 1860 when the president Gabriel Garcia Moreno came to power and ushered in an authoritarian rule. So it was his kind of thoughts that Ecuador's challenges were based on a lack of nationalism, since there was such division in the country, and he felt this was caused by the lack of religion. So when he came in, he brought in a sense of strict adherence to Catholicism, as well as a strong authoritarian regime. And although his rule aimed to improve the economic and educational situation within the country, his strict adherence to Catholicism and his use of unpaid labor of the indigenous and poor population made him relatively unpopular. However, he did increase the GDP, increased education rates, and kind of allowed and built infrastructure which allowed Ecuador to continue its economic progress. However, he was assassinated in 1875, as well as another president named Eloy Alfaro, who was assassinated in 1912 by being publicly set ablaze after continuing to attempt to fix the economic disruptions. One other mentionable president was Amila Mawad, who attempted to stabilize the country by initiating the process to adopt the US dollar as a national currency. On March 9th, 2000, this initiative was passed and the dollarization was completed. And so the US dollar is currently the official currency within Ecuador, which replaced the sucre. Now that brings us to modern day. So the national government is a multi-party unicameral presidential system, with the executive branch being led by the president, who chooses his or her cabinet members and appoints mayors of provinces, ambassadors, etc. And the legislative is the National Assembly of Ecuador, comprised of 137 members. It's the main center for legislation and constitutional law. The judicial is unfortunately a very weak branch of the government, which is due to lots of corruption in there, as well as the president and National Assembly frequently ignoring the ruling that the National Court has set forth. With all of the seats in the National Assembly, as well as the presidency being on a popularly elected basis, there is universal suffrage. However, Ecuadorian law requires voters be literate, and due to the high rate of illiteracy among Black and Indigenous people, This rule continues to perpetuate the longstanding discrimination against the indigenous population. So throughout its history, Ecuador has just kind of ignored the indigenous population and the poor population and focus on attempting to grow an economy through strictly political regime. This has created an unstable economy and continues to require people to go on their own to fight for civil rights and indigenous rights, as well as power within government. Thank you.